Hey everyone, it's Sophia. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've already been here before. I have found that when I'm on BookTube or BookTok, it's always the same books that I'm hearing about, which most of them well deserve the hype or whatever you want to call it. But today I thought we would dive into some of the books that I really loved and that I haven't heard many people talk about. And just a disclaimer, I do spend a fair bit of time on BookTube and BookTok, but I'm not so well versed, so I'm sorry if any of these are books that you've actually heard about before. I tried my best to find ones that I haven't heard much of and that have lower number of ratings on Goodreads, but I also want these books to be able for you guys to buy or support somehow by reading or something, so finding the most obscure books possible just isn't too feasible. So just wanted to get that out of the way, but I think most of these are going to be ones that you can try, and maybe there's something new from the genres you read currently. So just trying to expand some horizons today. So the first book I have is called The Stationery Shop by Marian Kamali. I want to say, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with pronunciation for some names. So first of all, stunning cover with the gold work. As you can see, this book has 4.22 stars and 90,000 ratings. So it's not unheard of, but it's not super popular. This is set in Iran in 1953. So that's a time when the political unrest was starting, but women were still very free at that time, which they're not today, unfortunately. So we kind of go through that saga in this book. Follows a teenager named Roya and her time that she spends at a man called Mr. Fakhri, I believe. And he owns a stationery shop. So that's why it's called The Stationery Shop. She spends a lot of her time there and eventually meets another guy there. Mr. Fakhri kind of sets them up, and his name's Bauman. I'm so sorry for these pronunciations, guys. I'm really trying. And then you get to follow their budding romance. They're teenagers and they eventually decide, after spending a lot of time together in the stationery shop, that they want to get married. So it's really cute. It's a really cute romance-ish. It's not like a typical romance. Then, unfortunately, there's a great coup d'etat, I think it's how you pronounce it, in the square by the stationery shop, and they get separated, Roya and Bauman, and they actually never see each other again. Don't think that's a spoiler, I think it's in the description. But you get to follow each of their lives separately, mostly Roya's, and then 60 years later they reunite and they get to talk about why did that happen? Why did we never see each other again? What were our lives like? And is there a possibility that we can now spend the rest of our short time we have left together? So it's really quite sweet. It's set in an important time that I think people should know about, 1953 in Iran. And yeah, it's great. It's moving. I think you'll go through it quickly if you enjoy these types of reads. Yeah, I highly recommend The Stationery Shop. Okay, the next book I have is, I really hope it's still in print and that people are able to find it places. This one is a travel book, and it's actually a non-fiction. So it's called Road Trip Rwanda by Will Ferguson. It's called A Journey into the New Heart of Africa. That's like the subtitle. I think that's what it's called. This book I found at Value Village, and it only has 854 ratings on Goodreads. So this one is really, really under the radar, but it was great. It's a real story, so it follows Will Ferguson as he goes with a friend that he met living here in, I think it's Canada, either Canada or the United States, where he met a friend who was a Rwandan refugee. And then as their friendship progresses, his friend invites him to actually go back to Rwanda and see, this is 20 years after the Rwandan genocide, which was 1990s, and see the country, why the country is great and why people should travel. And then Will Ferguson writes this book encouraging more people to go to Rwanda or just to learn about Rwanda as a country. So this book also has it's very small. It's like under 1 page, but I think about it a lot. It's a great portrayal of PTSD where, and it's not a spoiler, I don't think, it's just a small part of the book where he just actually gets like super shaken because he sees like a jacket on the ground where they're walking, but when it was the Rwandan genocide, that's how he saw like bodies, like that's what the bodies looked like that he was seeing. So obviously it's a tough read, so a little bit of a trigger warning on that. If you don't know much about the Rwandan genocide, it's good to get you into it. There's other books written about this topic as well, as it's a very big part of our history, and basically the whole world failed to intervene when this was happening, which is quite unfortunate. It's something that I focus on in my history degree quite a bit. So yeah, this was great, and I highly recommend this if you're able to get your hands on it. The next book I have is Between Two Kingdoms by Suleika Jaoud. Now, I really like her as a person. I follow her on Instagram, and that's how I found out about this book, actually, is just through following her. This one has a 4.43 star and 102,000 ratings. So this one's it's known. People know about this book, but I thought I would share it anyways. It's really great. I really like her as a person. The storytelling was amazing. It's basically, so it's a memoir. It's about Suleika herself, who when she was 19, she got diagnosed with leukemia, and she found out she was moved to Paris, and she's itchy, and then she was getting sick all the time. She thought maybe it's the air, it's the new air of this place that I'm living in. And then unfortunately she found out that it was leukemia, and she had to go through years and years of isolation in hospitals and cancer treatment. So it follows, basically half of the book is about her time in cancer treatment and the people that she meets in the hospital. And also during that time, she starts writing a blog about her experiences online. And a lot of people resonate with that blog and reach out to her. And when she gets into remission, when she gets better, she buys a van. She learns how to drive manual stick shift with herself and her little dog, who you can see right there, that's Suleika, and then the little dog, it's so cute. She goes on a road trip all around the United States, and she meets people that have written to her while she was in the hospital and who really liked her blog. So it's a great portrayal of that, and what the kingdoms are is like the kingdom of the sick and the well, and it's basically that she was between the two kingdoms because she's healthy now, but she was sick for so long, but she's not sick anymore, so she doesn't fit in with the sick people, but she's not truly healthy because she was sick for so long, and she has lasting effects from that, so she's not fully well either. Like, she lost so much of her life. So she's basically stuck between these two kingdoms. I highly recommend giving this a try. And also it's with her and her husband, who is John Baptiste. He's a great musician. He did a lot of the music on the Disney movie Soul, which was quite good. And also just has his own music as well. But they have a Netflix documentary which is called American Symphony. I highly recommend that. Unfortunately, the leukemia comes back later in her life, not in this book, but later in her life. So in the documentary, they're going through her being in cancer again, while John is having a great time of his life musically and in his career. He's going to the Grammys, he's performing at so many amazing places, and then she's in the hospital. So it's like the duality of these two worlds, and so that documentary is really great. But also, please give this book a try if you haven't already. It's really great if you like memoir styles, and even if you don't, she's a great writer, so it reads kind of like a fiction book. It's really great. Another disclaimer is that this is gonna be so random. I'm not really sticking to one genre here. I'm kind of I looked through all of my bookshelves. What haven't I heard people talking about? And most of these are just like random genres that are varied and different, and you might want to dip your toe into. The next book I have is actually a graphic novel, which I don't read many of, but it's called Trashed by Durf McDurf. This one has a 3.83 stars and only nearly 4,000 reviews on Goodreads. This is something really funny. When I first read this, I read this many times. It's kind of like a comfort read, mostly because it's a graphic novel, so if you're in a reading slump, I find these can just pick me out of it really fast. It's a true story as well. It's about Durf, and he works as a waste collections. Is that the correct term for the like collections department? A garbage man, basically, but I don't know if that's the right term. And I thought that this was really interesting because we don't know much about that job. We hear about a lot of different jobs, but it's something that's not glamorous, obviously, but this gives you an inside look into what they really have to go through as garbage men. I don't know if I can say that. Is that okay? I'm just gonna say it, sorry. As garbage men and waste collectors. It was also really funny. So it's lighthearted. It's easy to go through. It's funny. I'll give you a sneak peek of the illustrations just so you can see if it's like your style. It's like that, you see? I think this is actually like one of my funniest pages. It's so funny. So yeah, it's like one color, sort of. But yeah, I thought this one was really great. And also on a side, I haven't actually read it, but that author, Durf Back Durf, he also wrote a book called My Friend Dahmer because he actually went to school with Jeffrey Dahmer in middle school. I believe that one's a graphic novel as well. That could be something if you're interested in true crime. It was also turned into a movie, like a fiction movie, not a documentary, about growing up with Jeffrey Dahmer and what was he like before he became actually crazy. The next one is probably the most popular book that I'm going to talk about here. It's a little bit of an age regression, a little bit of a bring you back to your childhood. Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. This one has a 3.9 stars and nearly 300,000 ratings on Goodreads, but I still haven't really heard anyone talk about it. This really stuck with me. I want to show you. This is my copy from like actually when I was a kid. I first read this in grade 5, but you can see it's like the spine is pretty much gone. The pages are yellow and old, and it's certainly been well loved. So I did end up buying myself a newer copy so I can read this one and keep this one for old time's sake. This really stuck with me because as a kid, I think this was my first realistic portrayal into immortality that I read about. And I think about this book probably every month, if not every couple months, just in the way that immortality is portrayed. And do we really want to be immortal? Or is that even a good thing that we should strive for? Basically, it follows a girl and her relationship with a family who accidentally find the spring of life, the like fountain of youth, and them and their horses, this family, are now immortal. And they meet her. So one thing that I will say that I don't love is there's a boy he's like older and the girl is really young, and he wants to give her some of the immortality water, and he says drink it when you're older and then we can get married. That I don't like. That's weird, honestly, but so I don't really know how to apologize for that. That's weird, okay? Period. Full stop. That's weird. But the rest of the book is really great, so I highly recommend this one if you want, like, as well, very short. It's easy to read because it's designed for middle grade children. So yeah. The next book that I have to share with you guys is called The Shape of Family by Shipley Somaya Gowda. She has become, after I read this book, one of my favorite authors. Every time she comes out with a new release every few years, I buy it and I read it because I really like her writing. This one has 3.81 stars and 4,000 ratings on Goodreads. I really want it to be higher than that because it's so great. This follows a family and what it means to lose someone in your family, deal with grief, and how do we find community after something horrible has happened. Sometimes bad things can happen when you're really desperate to find a sense of belonging and a sense of community. And I thought the portrayal was really great in this book. There's a girl, a daughter, and she basically blames herself for the tragedy that has occurred in the family. And the rest of the family kind of blame her too a bit because it was her fault in a way, but she was young and she didn't know, she didn't mean to, right? I'm not gonna say what it was, but it is known that there's a tragedy when you read the front cover, so that's not a spoiler in and of itself. And also something that was cool was that it follows the son who has passed away, it says that in the cover, after death as like a ghost, but it's not like a weird spiritual thing. He is watching his family from afar, and it's just his perspective on, he doesn't blame anyone for what happened. So it's really great. It's really touching and moving, and I highly recommend this one. I think she's a great writer, and she just writes family dynamics so well. So I would recommend starting with The Shape of Family if you want to get into her books. But then she also has her newest release, which is called A Great Country. She has The Golden Son, and The Secret Daughter. The Secret Daughter is the book that I read first of hers. I think it is her first release, but The Shape of Family is my favorite one. So if those books that I've mentioned aren't quite your cup of tea, aren't quite your favorite genre, now we're getting into more sci-fi dystopian with The Book of the Unnamed Midwife by Meg Ellison. This one has 4.1 stars on Goodreads and 23,000 ratings. I will say before I say anything else that it's a bit of a tough read. It follows an unnamed midwife. She doesn't have a name in the book. You don't hear about her. As she goes through this dystopian world where a fever has killed most women and children and makes childbirth nearly impossible, where if child does want to be born, it's very unlikely to happen, and most likely the mom and baby will pass away during childbirth. So it's tough mostly in the sense that it's quite graphic, and the world is a world where there are a few women and everything has fallen to chaos. And what do the men remaining do when there's few and far between women? And I'll tell you, it's not great. So there's some like slavery things. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there. It is a tough read, but I think that if you can handle it, it's really great. It's sort of Handmaid's Tale-esque, but more dystopian, I think. And also in the series, there are two other books. There is the Book of Edda and also the Book of Flora. So I liked The Unnamed Midwife the best. Book of Edda was good. When we got into Book of Flora, it kind of started diverging from what I liked about the other two books, and there was more smut scenes, which personally I felt like didn't fit. That's just my personal opinion. And all of these books, the first one, the woman has to disguise herself as a man to survive. So that's an interesting topic. But then in the last book, it covers interesting themes of gender identity and what does it mean when you have no choice but to be your own gender because there's no access to healthcare or anything like that. So it was interesting, that topic in the last book, but personally I felt that the way that it was explored could have been better. I don't know, I don't want to be mean, but yeah, I highly recommend the first one. If you like the first one, go into the other ones, but yeah, just my opinion. Another dystopian style one that I have for you guys today is called After the Flood by Cassandra Montag. This is really interesting because something about me loves water worlds. I read Fable, which if you guys haven't read Fable, I highly recommend that one, but it's well known, so I couldn't include this in its video. But something about me loves modern pirate stories and water worlds. So this follows a mom and a daughter when they're living in the far future where flooding from global warming has gotten so extreme that there's basically no land, so everyone has to live on boats. And it just follows them trying to survive because it's hard. I don't know if I mentioned, but this one has 3.69 stars and 16,000 ratings on Goodreads. Also, I think about this book often because it has a really cool portrayal of scurvy, which is something that pirates get or just regular people get if they're living on boats and they don't have access to a lot of vitamin C. So the daughter in particular suffers with scurvy, and I just thought that the portrayal of that illness in this book was great. I think it was accurate. I've never had scurvy, so I don't know if it's fully accurate, but I thought it was really interesting because it's a disease that we don't hear much about nowadays. So highly recommend After the Flood if you're looking for an easy, doesn't cover so many heavy topics, so it's an easy-ish read, and it's really interesting, and the world is so different from ours that it's a little bit of escapism if that's what you're looking for. Okay, the second last-ish book that I have to tell you guys about today is Cage of Souls by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is how do you say high fantasy but for sci-fi? High sci-fi? I don't know. It's a advanced sci-fi book. So you need to focus a bit more. I wouldn't say that you're gonna fly through this. It's also like 600 pages as well. But this was so good. The world building was crazy. It's so good. It has 4.2 stars and only 10,000 ratings on Goodreads. What? This is deserving of so much more. 1 million it needs. In this book, we follow a man named Stefan and his journey from escaping this prison, going through an insane jungle with some crazy creatures, and eventually into a city called Shadrapar, I believe, which is the last city that they know of. And there's some really interesting characters. I can't say so much, but I highly, highly recommend this one if you're looking for a sci-fi book. And I said it's like high sci-fi. I don't know how to call it. It's advanced, but it's not pretentious. Like, he doesn't make it hard to read just for the fun of it. You can get through it if you just focus, but it's not like something that you're really going to struggle through. I think once you get into, if you get past 100 pages, you're good. It's not so hard to understand, but it is a crazy world, so there's a lot of world building and there's a lot of characters that you follow and meet up with. But it's one perspective, one POV. It's just Stefan, so you don't have to deal with multiple points of view or anything like that. So that book really got me into Adrian Tchaikovsky. I know nothing about him as a person, but I know that I really like his books. He's one of my favorite authors now. I always watch out for if he's releasing anything new or if I can find any of his books. So I would say start with Cage of Souls, and I'm not going to recommend his books that I haven't read, but he also has this series called Children of Time, and it's a series, but I've only read the first book. So I would say start with Cage of Souls. If you like Cage of Souls, try Children of Time. Children of Time, I'm going to tell you a bit about as well because, so Cage of Souls is my recommendation. Children of Time is more well known, but this one is crazy because it follows development of spiders into advanced species like we are as humans who have developed from apes. But imagine if that happened with spiders. It's crazy. It's actually a crazy concept. He's an insane writer. He's so good. So that's something interesting as well. If you like that better, maybe start with Children of Time, but my favorite one is definitely Cage of Souls. Okay, the last books that I have to mention to you guys today are this duology. And I would go as far to say that this is currently my favorite sci-fi book of all time. So first we have the first one in the series, which is called The Space Between Worlds. This one has 3.94 stars and 40,000 ratings on Goodreads. In my notes, I wrote yearning. That's it. It's a sapphic romance-ish, but I will say romance is not heavy in the plot if that's not something you enjoy. It's forbidden romance in a sense that they come from completely different worlds and struggle to understand where the other one has came from. But that's not what's most important, is the world building. It follows a woman named Cari, and she comes from a really bad background. So that means that in pretty much all worlds except for hers, she's dead. So that means that she's perfect candidate for multiverse travel, and that's what we cover in this book. You cannot go to a world where you are alive, so that's why she's great. She can travel to tons of different worlds that others cannot, but one time she enters a world that has a particular dark secret, and she has to uncover that and take it back to her world and try to figure out what the hell is going on. So this was great, but, and I'm gonna say it, the second one, Those Beyond the Wall, is even better. This one has 4.13 stars, only 1,500 ratings. What the heck? I would even say, so it is so different. The characters, Cari and a few other characters from the first book, do come into this book, and you need to know about them to understand what's going on in a sense. But the main character is completely different, and basically all the characters that we follow are completely different. It's so good. It's so good. I think about this book so often, genuinely, like almost every day, if not every week. If you didn't like the first book, I would say please try this one. And if you still don't like it, I'm sorry, but it's just great. Please read this, guys, please. It's so good, genuinely. But then also this one specifically is about like raging against the government and how it controls people, how it chooses favorites, really. And it's like those beyond the wall, literally, as there is a wall surrounding this city called Wiley City. And if you're outside of it, you're scum, basically. If you're inside, you're great. But even on the inside, it's not so great because there's different levels. Anyways, read it. Read it. Genuinely read this duology. It's great. I don't know if she plans on putting out any more in this series, but just as it is, it's so great. I've only read this book series once. I read it in 2024, so not so long ago, but it is definitely a new favorite for me and going to be somewhat of a comfort read. Okay, I lied. I'm having too much fun. I want to share a few more books with you guys. Number 1, A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier. So as you can see, I really like memoirs. For some reason, this is something new that I've gotten into in the past year or two. So sorry if that's not something that other people like, but I would say give them a try if that's something you don't think you like. You might be surprised at how much they can read like a fiction book sometimes. So this one is not as underground, I say that as if it's like something to be desired. I want books to be popular. So this one has 4.16 stars and almost 190,000 ratings on Goodreads. It is a bit of a short read. This is the guy as he's grown up. And as you can probably tell, it is Memoirs of a Boy Soldier. His name is Ishmael Bey, if I didn't say that. I think this is important to read so that we don't forget to protect our children everywhere. They don't just have to be in the country that we're in right now. I think children need to have rights everywhere. They do, legally, but are they enforced? Sometimes no. It's a very heavy read, I will say, extremely heavy, so content warning on that. This follows him in Sierra Leone. He was 13 when he became a boy soldier, and at 16 he was rescued or taken out by UNICEF. So that was 3 years where he was directly fighting, and before that he was displaced at 12, and it follows his life as he has to navigate literally trying to survive alone at the age of 12 with no family and just a few friends. And then he becomes a soldier, unfortunately, and he has to do some terrible things. He witnesses some terrible things, and then he gets saved. But how is he supposed to assimilate into regular life when that was his reality? So I think it's important to read. And I just think it's very important to read about all different types of people's experiences around the world and really just try to put yourself in everyone's shoes. I think it teaches you a lot about humanity and humility and realizing that everyone is more alike than you would think, but we're also very different and we have different experiences. So be gentle with our fellow humans. Okay, I promise this is the last memoir that I will be sharing, but this is one of the rare books that had made me cry. That's rare, and it did. It's called An Invisible Thread by Laura Schaff, and this one has 45,000 ratings on Goodreads and a 4.6 stars. This one follows Laura as she has, in her middle age, she's single, and she develops a budding friendship with a young homeless-ish child who just happens to be Black, and he's living on the streets. And this follows him as when they met when he's super young, and then the friendship that goes all through their life until he actually has his own children. And it's a very emotional read. It's a hard read. Again, it deals with what he has to go through having parents who are in and out of the prison system. They're in and out of drugs and rehab, and he has to deal with that really directly and has to raise himself and his siblings, and it's really tough. It's really challenging for him, and then he just makes some of his own bad decisions. Sometimes he takes advantage of Laura, and it's strange. Personally, I don't know if I would have such a relationship with a young boy. It's nothing weird, at least not in the book, I promise. It's nothing weird, and he does think of her as his mom, so it's more of like a motherly relationship, but it's just a unique, I guess I would say, not strange, but I would call it a unique experience that these two people forge such a connection when they come from such different worlds, and it's a connection that lasts through life. So that's why it's called an invisible thread. They are connected through life. So this is, again, something you can read and you can learn about other people's experiences. One woman, she's semi-wealthy, she has a nice apartment in New York City, and the other boy is literally fighting for his life on the street and doesn't know when his next meal is going to come from. Very, very important. It did make me tear up at the end, so I do recommend this one. Finally done with memoirs. Sorry if that wasn't interesting to you guys, but I do say give them a shot. The next one that I want to talk to you about is Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth. Veronica Roth is the author of Divergent, as you many know. Obviously, I'm not putting that on this list because that is very well known. Carve the Mark is not as well known. It does have 91,000 reviews on Goodreads and 3.78, so, people know about it. But I would say give it a try. If you didn't like Divergent, read this anyways. If you like Divergent, read this anyways. But it's so different. This one is like okay, I'm gonna say it, Dune-esque. I'm gonna put that out there. Dune, but for YA. It's like space, two different countries fighting, two different bloodlines-ish fighting, and then they fall in love. Two people, teenagers, okay, love, I don't know about love, but they like each other, and they work together. Anyways, I don't know if I'm selling this, but I thought this was good. It's like a space odyssey. It has really interesting forms of power, and like power, her power is her pain, basically, and she can give her power to other people, which means that she's giving her pain to other people, and his power is that he can stop her pain. So they spend a lot of time together, and yeah, then they fall in love, basically. I don't know if I would call it love, but anyways, I like this one. I didn't like the second one so much. The second one has much more action, which was a criticism of this one, that it didn't have enough action. For me, I'm not so heavy on loving action. I like some, but I like more political stuff, I would say, and I did like the romance. If it's a YA book, I like it having a little bit of like romance or friendship or stuff, so this was great on that. Yeah, the world building was really cool. There's some death, so it's tricky in that sense, especially like family death, so I would say warning if you don't want to read that. So it's very different from Divergent in the way that the world is builded. But yeah, I would say give Veronica Roth a shot if you haven't read anything else but Divergent. This is really good. I'm going to stay on that Veronica Roth note and mention her first adult fantasy novel short story that she wrote, novella, When Among Crows, by, of course, Veronica Roth. This one has only 12,000 Goodreads ratings and a 3.72. My only criticism of this one is that I do think that it's too short. So we weren't able to delve into as much world building as I would like, meaning that I got lost sometimes. I didn't quite understand where we were or what was happening. Nonetheless, this is a retelling of Polish folklore, like Baba Yaga, so funny to say, and stuff like that. But yeah, it was really interesting. It is something different than most things I've read, I would say. I wish it was longer. I genuinely think that she could have had a good longer story out of this, but at the same time, it did what it needed to do in the pages that she had. And yeah, it was great. And I would say, of course, give Veronica Roth a try in her other books. So this is if you're more into adult stuff and not so much violence, but there's like, they have to solve some puzzles to uncover whatever they're trying to find out, and he's like a soldier who has stopped being a soldier but needs to reclaim it. I don't know, it's really, really interesting and different from anything else I've read, especially anything else from Veronica Roth. Huge shift from Divergent and Carve the Mark. So give When Among Crows a try. Now, I promise it's the final book. I'm not pranking anymore. Another sci-fi sort of YA one is Firebreak by Nicole Cornhurst Stace. I don't know. I'm sorry. It has only 3,000 ratings on Goodreads and 3.86 stars, so it's really not that popular. I just read this in September. This one is sort of like Ready Player One in the sense that most people spend their free time in a video game. The main character's name is Mallory, and she's actually a streamer on a video game. And there's sort of these elusive figures in the video game, but also in real life, that people don't really know if they are people or if they're AI or what they are, what's their deal. And Mallory firsthand gets to see them in the video game, which shoots her viewers up, and then she sees them in real life and she gets to uncover what they are and how the government is so messed up and what the government did to children, basically, to turn them into these war machines. So that's the premise. It's really good. It's really interesting world building. It's grimy in the sense that Ready Player One is, where it's like they don't have water, they barely like shower, I think, and they're living like 8 people in one hotel room. So it's really good, really crowded cities if you like that sort of thing, oppressive government, border checks and stuff like that. But yeah, this was really good. It is a YA, so it's not hard world building. I would say that it did sort of lag in the middle for a bit, but push through, and I promise that the ending is great. So last book, highly recommend. Okay, so that's all the books that I have to recommend to you today. Those were books that I really liked that I haven't heard many people talk about. Sorry if most of them were memoirs. That is just something that I tend to like, but had a bit of fantasy mixed in there, had a bit of sci-fi, high sci-fi as I put it. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.